I think that's a mistake, and I think that what that does is puts all the emphasis away from his life and what he taught and what he did and what his followers did and how that movement that he created to subvert the center of imperialism and economic oppression, how that movement became the mess that is Christianity today. So finally, just to wrap things up, the reason I see this as important, people will say, well, okay, if you understand Jesus as just this historical figure who, had revolutionary ambitions or had radical ambitions and then he died, well, why does it matter? Who cares? There's thousands of people like him who tried to stand up to the ruling classes and they killed him for it. Why is Jesus important? Well, part of that, and this is maybe a weakness of me, but I still consider myself a Christian, and I'm not ready to let go of it. I believe in a kind of what you'd call a post-theology. I think that we can recognize that God and religion and faith is something that humans have created, and that it is a product of class struggle like all of our other ideas, but we can still choose to practice it. We can still choose to use it and practice it and believe in it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I also think that the historical Jesus is a special and especially good example of revolutionary praxis. And because there are so many Christians in the world, and I mean the majority of the world is either Christian or Muslim, and they all love Jesus. So it's a way that we can kind of reach the masses, reclaim the real Jesus who actually lived, and apply his teachings to our movements to end capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, etc., etc. And these are, by applying these examples of dual power and prefigurative politics, we recognize that, well, if we want to create a new world, we can start to do that now. We don't have to wait until capitalism busts itself to start building communities where we can all be equal, where we metaphorically sit at the table together and eat together, where the first are last and the last are first. We can do that now in our spaces. And I think it's also by recognizing that there are institutions like the family, like our centralized religious authorities that have been complicit in reproducing these authoritarian and unequal social hierarchies, and we can challenge them. We can challenge them by creating alternative systems in the lives of people living today that we are trying to convert to our side. And I also think that it's important because I think that we can frame our struggle to end class society. What we're talking about is, again, I'm a Marxist and that's my bias. I believe that all of these forms of oppression are as a result of class society. Not that class is the most important thing and we have to always talk about it, and if you talk about anything else, you're an identity opportunity. I'm not like that. But I do think that class society, as it has existed for thousands of years, is the ultimate source of inequality among people. And our battle to end class society and all of its attendant forms of oppression is something that reaches back thousands of years before the beginning of time, and Jesus is an important link in that chain, and we should reclaim him for our movements today. So that's what I had. I want to see... I
didn't do that.
No, it's only 1 o'clock. So we have a little time. I want to see if anyone has thoughts, if you want to challenge me, if you have any questions, if just whatever. Yeah.
First of all, I just wanted to thank you. It's really incredible ideas here. Totally. So it's a lot to chew on.
Yeah. I hope so.
Look at my dog, Henry. Yeah.
What's
a dog?
Like you said you've written this in a book. And,
Yeah.
Like, where is that at? Or like...
So I finished the book, the manuscript, and I have to format it for the publisher because academic publishing is just a mess nowadays, and I'm a nobody, at least until this book comes out. So I don't have like a staff to help me or an assistant or whatever. So I have to turn in the final formatted manuscript next week. The deadline is a week from today, actually, yeah. And then they have it on their schedule. I believe it'll be out early next year. So I will definitely be promoting the hell out of it.
Yeah.
Yes, please, yeah.
Yeah, sounds great. Sounds awesome.
Thank you.
Do you have a title?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have said that. It's called The Carpenter's Son, a Proletarian Reconstruction of Jesus of Nazareth.
So,
I want to challenge you.
No surprise.
I'm going to say
Yeah.
that. So I've been working with Christian more than a year. It goes back even before Red Star Ministry. We've been working on leftist religion. On the resurrection, you probably know where I'm going with this. I'm going to read from Ezekiel chapter 37 because I think it explains why the resurrection was an important symbol. And I'm going to read from the Jewish translation, so the word Lord and God are not in there. They use the Jewish word. Because I think that helps people not hear the patriarchal authoritarian culture. So with the hand of Adonai upon me, Adonai carried me out by his spirit and set me down in the middle of the valley, and it was full of bones. He had me pass all around them. There were so many bones lying in the valley, and they were so dry. He asked me, human being, can these bones live? And I answered, Adonai Elohim, only you know that. And he said, prophesy over these bones. Say to them, dry bones, hear what Adonai has to say. To these bones, Adonai Elohim says, I will make breath enter you, and you will live. I will attach ligaments to you, make flesh grow on you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you. You will live, and you will know that I am Adonai. I'm not going to read the rest of it, because the basic point is that he's talking about Israel at this point, which is the people who have been oppressed and colonized over and over and over again, and they feel like dead, dry bones. So resurrection is a metaphor for the people being liberated from being dead in oppression and colonialism and all that. So I agree with you. It probably isn't a literal miracle, but it was this something Jesus did in our lives made us feel like we had been given new flesh and a new body. And he must have been given new flesh and a new body because they believed literally in miracles. The ancient world wasn't scientific. They didn't have ways to test what was literally possible. So anyway, just a rant on the resurrection. Even though I agree, it's not literal, it's still an important symbol, even I think today, because it literally is the revolution. The resurrection is the revolution.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
I know you don't.
I don't mean to say that we should just fuck the resurrection. It's not even a part of just don't. But what I just mean is that it's been overemphasized, and I kind of want to return to emphasizing other things as well. I agree that it is a very powerful symbol. The cross was a symbol of state terror. The cross was a symbol of, hey, if you fuck with us, this is what's going to happen to you. We are the Romans. We're the ruling class. And I mean, everyone's heard that America is the new Roman Empire. There's always been a dominant empire throughout the world. It was Rome at the time of Jesus. So the cross was a symbol of Rome's power. The early Christians made it a symbol of liberation and revolution instead. And then it became a symbol of the church today, which is, But so, I agree with Charlie. I don't mean to totally denigrate the resurrection as a symbol, and I think symbols are very important and powerful. And of course, if you do believe in it, I totally respect that, and I'm not trying to shit upon that at all. It's just my personal beliefs about it. Cool. Yeah. I mean, is there anything? It doesn't have to be a question. It can be just a comment. It can be something I got wrong, or.
I was really glad that the resurrection piece came up because I think that was what made me the most uncomfortable.
Sure.
I've connected with people in the area who say they're practicing resurrection, and so I think it's definitely maybe a tool or something.
Definitely. My grandma believes in lots of people have come back from the dead, and she tells me every time I see her to try to convert me to her version of Christianity. It's an active belief that a lot of people have, and I don't believe in disrespecting people's beliefs unless they're oppressive, unless they hurt other people. So this again, that's just my personal worldview, and other people can have different ones, and it doesn't mean we can't come to a unity about what Jesus actually did. So my thing is always, nobody's ever going to fully agree about Jesus. It's impossible. He's too big of a figure in our society. But what I try to do with this historical Jesus is, here's what we can agree on, and let's come up with disagreements from there and believe what we want to believe from there. But this basic level of Jesus as a revolutionary is, I think, something that we should all be able to agree on.
Because even like having this historical analysis of Jesus doesn't take away. Because like for me, in my faith, I consider like I'm Catholic, but I also grew up in the charismatic kind of renewal within the church, and so like the aspect of like the personal relationship with Jesus is something that's really important to me, and to have that interior life where I know that like I can meet him within my heart, like is important to me. But like having that historical analysis doesn't take away from that. If anything, it builds even more, because like I know that Jesus is with me when I'm in the street. Like I know that Jesus is with me when I'm doing mass work, even if it's something as simple as just like picking up trash off the ground. Like I know that God is with me like in that space, and Jesus is with me in that space, and knowing that historical analysis, like it healed so much of like that the oppressiveness of like it bridged that gap that I feel that so many of us who grew up in like evangelical, Catholic, or charismatic spaces had, whereas like this is Jesus and you're over here, and the cross bridges that gap. But in reality, like because you always hear that like the cross bridges the gap between God and us, but I don't feel that. But hearing that God, like this, for me, like I don't know if I believe Jesus is God. It's a weird space for me at this point. But I know he's Jesus, and I know that like because Jesus was doing the work that he was doing then, that we're doing now. It's like now that bridges that there's that bridge there.
Yes. Absolutely.
I just like to add, like, in terms of something, like, I like this, I've never really thought of Jesus as a, like, historical figure, and so, like, listening to a lot of this was really helpful in seeing that. And I grew up in, like, a strict Catholic, Roman Catholic. My parents actually are from Southern Africa, so they are former colony sort of situation. And so when my mom came, she brought a lot of that stuff with her, and a lot of things about sin, and, you know, you're going to go to hell. Like, a lot of that was built into me, and it's why I stepped away from the church and from, like, Catholicism for so long. And so I think one thing that really stuck out to me was the definition of sinners and where that came from. And so understanding, right, like what my mom says is a sinner isn't what was really what they were talking about when Jesus was alive and what Jesus was working with. So I really like that a lot.
Yeah, you can see about like sin is just one example about how this very Jewish idea of Jesus and his earliest followers became totally twisted into something else as Christianity became a movement of Greeks and Romans and Gentiles instead of Jews. They kind of took these Jewish concepts, didn't understand them properly because they weren't Jews, and then it totally became something else.
Yeah, I think it's really useful to have one your talk, but like a document of something that's like really focusing on what Jesus' practice was like, or like what he was actually trying to fucking say, you know?
Yeah.
It's just, you know, you just get all this other bullshit from organized religion, like, and as it pertains to like the superstructure, and I think going through it materially and really having that base understanding of like where these things come from.
Right.
It's so useful. And yeah, it is a lot to like take on.
Yeah.
It's like it got the cogs turning about like how do we as like communist revolutionaries, organizers, leftists like reach people about like with like bridge these gaps and like actually convey a message that's not, you know, dismissive or patronizing, right? But that's like liberatory for a person who's identifying as like a Christian.
Also,
Yeah.
even just this little packet is like such a good resource.
Yeah.
I'm glad you think so. I wish I'd made more.
Yeah.
Someone could have a picture. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Anyone wants to take a picture, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Like, I mean, if all Jesus wanted to do was like tell us something, he could have just stood on the corner and preached and preached and preached, and nobody today would have any idea who he was. But he actually took it to not the streets, because he lived in a rural area, Galilee, but he took it to the roads between these villages, and he took it to these fishing villages and these farming communities, and he actually put it into practice. And that's what we need to be doing if we want to build a new system.
All right, is the recording going to be available, or can we get that?
Yeah, it's still recording. I recorded the questions. Yeah, I'm going to, when I get home tomorrow, I will put it on my computer and I will try to upload it. And anyone who wants to stay in contact, I have a little contact sheet. Put your email or whatever down, and anyone who wants it, I will make sure can get it.
And also, you can Google Red Star Ministry
Yeah, the Facebook page is called Red Star Ministry.
on Facebook.
Yeah.
Search it, not necessarily Google it. Fuck Google.
Cool. Is there any? I mean, yeah, we can keep this going. If not, I want to close by just recommending some like further reading if anyone wants. But if there's anything else people want to say, cool.
I mean, if there's not any particular direction, just like with this group of people here, I'm really curious what people think just about, like I'm definitely still pretty new to like a spiritual way of thinking and interacting with the world, and reintegrating that into my politics and my praxis. So like I'm just curious like what people think about like how safe activist spaces are for like these kinds of discussions and like just spirituality in general, like and if there's anything we can or should be doing to like integrate those things if that's what is worthwhile.
Can I say something?
Yeah, absolutely.
So Friendly Fire, part of what we do is we do actions. We actually do actions that have like a, I'll just use one as an example. So last year was the prison strike that was run by IWalk. And it was like, there was a lot of stuff happening in like Philadelphia at the time, and a lot of stuff just like popping up at different places, like noise demos, graffiti, everything was happening. And we organized with other comrades of ours, because we have Friendly Fire as a collective, but each of us are involved in other spaces. So like for me, like I'm in cadre training to join like FTP, Feed the People, and then I'm also like in other leftist spaces, not like as a Christian, but just like as a comrade. And so we organized with our friends and comrades to do an action called Goddamn Prisons instead of God Bless Prisons. So we organized this, it was like a rally where we used very Christian language. We actually ended up doing an exorcism. Like we had our exorcism rite that we did of the prison. Well, it wasn't the prison, it was the Roundhouse, which is like a city jail in Philadelphia. It was the closest prisons. None of us had cars. But we still wanted to bring it there. And it ended up being like multiple people that were not religious, or like, and some of them were people that I previously thought were anti-religious, went to this and they like and like got involved in this. And then outside of that, also we do. I was talking about the reading group that we do, and it's a reading group that's open to anyone. And for a lot of people, most of the people that come to it, it's like an opportunity to share your faith and know that the people that are sharing the faith around you are also like sharing the same, like in similar like political and ideological circles as you. But also what's really cool about it, it's the Gospel and Slantanagua that you're reading right now by Ernesto Cardenal, who was a priest in a guerrilla in Nicaragua during the Sandinista Revolution. And you can read more about him. I have the book with me, just like ask and you can see it. But a lot of people who come aren't religious whatsoever, but are going to this so that they can like learn more about this and apply it to their mass work, so that they can like use this in these conversations with people. But on the term of like spiritual practice, I can only speak personally, but I think for me a lot of it has been shifting over like how I communicate with God, and not coming from this place of like, oh, I'm so broken and you're going to fix me, but saying, and not saying like, and not asking for God to perform these miracles, not asking for God to do these like marvelous works in front of me, but saying like, I come to you with my hands and like show me how to offer them, like show me how to serve the people, and show me through my comrades, and I'll do it. Like, but just give me the grace to do it.
Wait, could you mention? You said Friendly Fire. Could you talk about what that is?
Yeah, I talked about earlier, but I'll say it again. It's a collective. Red Star's doing a lot more work than we are.
You'd be surprised.
Trying.
Maybe that's why we missed that.
Oh yeah, no, it's okay. No, I'm happy to share it again. It's a collective that started like over a year ago. Physically, it's been kind of like, it started the same way as like a Facebook page. Because it's hard as like people who are like Christian or spiritual, religious in any religion, not just like Christianity, on the left to kind of find each other. So a lot of us start Facebook pages to find each other. But we, we're a collective that's mostly in Philadelphia. And then we also have folks out in the Midwest as well. But it's like a spiritual home for people on the left but also for us in Philadelphia, also offer healing spaces for other leftists that are not exclusively like Christian. So like sometimes we've done like what was it? There was a lot of police brutality that happened in Philadelphia, not just like to like normal folks that experience police brutality, but a lot of activists were being like stalked by the police and attacked in the street. And so we started to have these like healing groups where we would come together and have like an open space to share the trauma that people were experiencing. And then we had a mediator that was there to help people give them the tools to like actively like cope in a healthy way. But yeah, it's just like a space of prayer, study, and sometimes direct action. Yeah.
Cool. I want to follow up on your question about sort of how in leftist groups start the conversation. I can't speak for Christian, although I think you might. I live in Chicago. I'm actually a minister. That's my job. I'm not getting paid anything because I'm hanging out with these strange left-wing startups, which are kind of my idea anyway, or we both had the same idea. So I am willing to travel, is what I want to say. I don't know where people all are from, but I will come and travel and talk. And I'm sure Christian might want to take his thing on the road, because this is sort of your first workshop. I've done a few, I've done them at conferences, although most of my stuff was more in the 90s than now. But I'm perfectly happy to come and meet with a group. If you've got a group that wants to talk, or a church, I preach in churches, and so
Have Bible, will travel.
have Bible, travel, have, you know, there's the old joke that you should really do theology with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. I said, no, you should have the Bible and the Communist Manifesto in the other. Anyway, so.
I kind of wanted to piggyback as well in the
please.
sense that what kind of opened me up to the idea of Christianity within left spaces and within radical movements was when I started kind of getting woke on the civil rights movement and thinking about, you know, the SCLC, and there was a lot of ally work that was being done by people in the North, churches that were sending people down. You know, I think that there is room for there to be coexisting groups, whether it's people that are religious or not identifying with religion, but I think that there is a definite history of religion being part of it in positive ways. So those have been kind of the things that I've been embracing the most recently, and kind of presenting those when people ask about it, you know, whether they're religious or not.
I just keep thinking of like Standing Rock and the ceremonies of the river and how it happens here, right here.
I have a question.
Yeah, of course.
You mentioned, I think it was your grandmother. You kind of go back and forth on Christianity. So
Yeah.
Have you had any luck, sort of de-reactionaryizing people with this tack?
In my family, no. My grandmother yesterday had a charismatic retreat at this weird campground that she used to live on with, and they created this big cross with like art on it, and right in the center of the cross was Donald fucking Trump.
No.
I'm not surprised.
I know.
It's like Twilight.
So
Yeah, my mother's in Oklahoma. Donald Trump is great. Oh.
I actually went to that, and I didn't preach or give a talk, but she wanted me to play some music there. So I played some like revolutionary Christian music, and it got a response. I like to think that if you try to meet some of these people where they're at, it'll get them some, not everybody. Some people are honestly, I know that Christianity has this very, very strong theme of redemption, and you know, you leave the 99 to go get the one sheep, and I want so hard to believe that, and it's really hard sometimes because some people seem like they're lost causes. But I keep trying. I have definitely gotten good responses from people online. Most of when I've tried to, I hate to use the term like educating because I don't want to think that like I'm this teacher and everyone has to listen to me. But when I've posted videos on Christian Marxism. I used to write a blog on Patheos. And I've gotten responses, like emails, not just comments, but people have taken the time to email me to say, I never thought of this way. Thank you for putting this way. Thank you for doing the work to collect this information this way. So I definitely think it's going to get a response, and I'm still trying to hone my message and talk to other people. This group has been wonderful. I love hearing you guys' feedback. And I think the more of us start trying to do stuff like this, the more people we're going to be able to reach.
It's just like these are like a lot of times these aren't the conversations that are being had. Like the conversations are like mostly like, oh, like there's nothing we can do. We should just like abandon this completely.
Yeah.
So I mean, like this is like the first step in that, and like creating that space where it's possible.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, tomorrow morning
We're going to have a worship
10 a.m.
service here.
church service.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah. So cool. I hope you guys get up
and
early
we
enough to
will
make
not
it.
try to save your soul.
No, it's yeah. Cool.
I'm
Yeah.
universalist. Everybody's already saved.
Right.
Even the rich who are going to go to hell first.
So yeah, we still have a little time. If anyone wants to talk more, I welcome it. If not, I'll just give you guys a few recommended things that you should look up or read or whatever. But if people want to hear that.
I'm sorry for talking a lot. Or you say something?
No.
I was gonna say on the point of like family members that are reactionary. My mom is actually like a super conservative Catholic family. My mom's a convert to Catholicism, which means like double reactionary. But my mom in the last year, like a year ago, or like a year and a half, if I would have said the words Bernie Sanders, she'd be like, hey, freak out.
Cross yourself.
She'd like cross herself, she'd be like, I'm praying for his soul. Like, she's now, like, she read the new Jim Crow. She's reading the Gospel in Slentonomic. She's reading that book by James Martin, that Jesuit priest, who was writing about like acceptance of like gay folks and queer folks into the church. And my mom called me the other day and she's like, I think I'm a communist. It's possible.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah! Like praise you, Jesus.
Yeah.
Like seriously. But like, no, I think the big thing with my mom is just like showing her that like I still love her.
Right.
And just like being open with her about the work that I am doing and like having these really like hard conversations consistently. But also like the immigration struggle was the one that like brought her in. Like she saw what was happening and she was like, we can't have this. And that was like what kind of flipped the switch. And then reading the new Jim Crow, she was like, now she's organizing in her workplace with but only like there's only one black man in her workplace and she's organizing with him against racism in their workplace. So she's like
Yeah.
she loves God and she wants to follow God wherever He's leading, and she's reading the Gospels and she's like, wait, the God that the church is telling me is not my God. Like,
You'd be amazed what people will find when they just read the Bible for themselves for the first time. And I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Did you want to say something? I thought I saw you.
Me?
No. At the end of the table.
Okay, I just walked in.
If not, it's fine.
Yeah, I like for me, my path has been like one of like environmental activism and like a close relationship to land, and then finding out about indigenous ways relating to land, and then spiritual perspectives, and then realizing that we're swimming in Christian water, so I better think about Jesus a little bit too. So I'm just curious, like, if there's anything in Christian stuff or Jesus, like, that is relating to like the land.
So I would say start with Judaism. Judaism has this incredibly powerful idea, and it's unfortunately not treated with the seriousness that it should be. But in the Bible, and I can look up the exact verse for you if you want. But when God is talking about how the land shall not be sold in perpetuity because the land belongs to me. You are all aliens and tenants on the land. And there's this idea that the land is not ours to do with whatever we want. It's not ours to profit off of. It's not ours to exploit. It belongs to God. So our job is to live on it because God gave it to us to live on, but our job is also to take care of it and to make sure that it is distributed equally. A lot of this is in the context of like agriculture, where it was believed that everybody was supposed to have their own land, It's this egalitarian idea because back in an early agricultural society, land is how you produce. It's the only way to produce. So it's this idea that everybody should be able to produce for themselves. But it's also, I mean, you could go back to the book of Genesis, where God creates people to be stewards of creation. That's an argument that gets used a lot in spiritual or religious environmentalist circles, that we have to be stewards of creation, is a phrase that's used a lot. Unfortunately, in Christianity itself, like since the time of Jesus and after Christianity became a kind of revival movement within Judaism, which is what it started as, and then as it became its own thing, that was all kind of lost. So I don't really know. My kind of wheelhouse is more like the history of Christianity and the historical Jesus and a little bit of like post-theology philosophy. I'm not super clued into like modern church movements. I don't know if anybody knows any churches that are around right now that are kind of making environmentalism, putting it on the agenda. I would welcome if anyone knows anything like that.
So there have been theologians who would call themselves eco-theologians, who have, used like the Jewish theology about the land, the image of caretaking and stewardship rather than domination and lordship, which comes straight out. The very word landlord, right, would not fit this idea that the land is a universal possession. It's not owned by individuals. So eco-theologians, so if you like Google eco-theology, you'll find people. And I don't know of any that have married that to a class struggle perspective. I know that has happened on the left, that there are lefts who try to intersect eco-politics and class politics. Definitely should, and of course race, gender. It's intersectional, right? Intersectional, let's put this up here, intersectional class war. And of course there are indigenous theologies where people who are, what you're talking about, like, I'm blanking on the water protectors, what was the place?
Standing Rock?
Standing Rock. I know, words escape me sometimes. Now, I mentioned I'm a minister. I'm in the Unitarian Universalist Association. Everybody knows what that is. We're the most post-Christian religion in some ways in the country. There are Christians, but they tend to be the minority. Most of our congregants are humanist or nothing, just kind of like, I may do you and nothing else, which is like, in that tradition, there were a lot of people who went to Standing Rock as UU ministers, and if you are just wanting to dip a toe in and you're not Christian, so you don't want to go to the UCC, which is probably the other most liberal.
I was going to say, yeah.
The other most liberal, the Disciples of Christ, pretty top-down tradition. If you just want to dip your toe into something that isn't going to push a lot of Jesus at you, a UU church is a good choice to sort of begin. Now, UUs are fucking privileged as hell. They all, they come from Massachusetts, Puritan, upper crust, but they're working on that. And having people show up who don't look like them or don't think like them actually helps them work on it more. Which is, like I said, none of the churches yet have decided to hire me. I'm working on that. Anyway, so I rambled over a lot of things. The eco-theology is a discipline. There's only a few books like God is Green. There is a book. You Google God is Green, you'll find a book. Eco-theology, you'll find books. And of course, indigenous theology, eco-spirituality, all that stuff. Yeah, and some Christians are working with trying to integrate that into their theologies.
And I do want to say this is a little bit, this is a quick thing, this is a little bit of a side, it's not necessarily about the ecology part of it, but I just do want to say that, I talk as a Christian and we're talking about Jesus, but I do like to think, and I hope that other people agree, that Christianity is something that can also be incorporated into other belief systems, or at least the teachings of Jesus. You can love Jesus and be a Jew or a Buddhist or an atheist or whatever. That I'm not like an exclusionist where I think you have to accept the word of Jesus. That's obviously not what we're about here. So,
you can be a Christian atheist. Hey, look it up.
Yeah, it is.
The real thing.
I
have a quick question.
Sure.
In like your research at all, was there anything interesting or noticeable you've kind of found out about like the idea of hell and where it came from and what it was used for?
Yeah. Hell did not exist in Judaism until what they call the intertestamental period. I'm mangling
You're
words.
doing it right.
Yeah, intertestament, the period between when the Hebrew Bible was finished and then the New Testament comes on.
Okay.
That is when belief in hell as like a place of punishment arose. Before that, there was an idea of an sort of afterlife, but it wasn't super defined. You won't really see it in the Bible. The Satan, for example, is not this, like, he's not the evil version of God in the Hebrew Bible anywhere. You won't, I mean, that just doesn't exist. It's not in there. Between the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, this idea started to develop, and this was when the Greeks, the Alexander and all of his successors, were conquering the Eastern Mediterranean and bringing these kind of Greek Platonic ideas about the universe, and it kind of merged and became the underworld, and it became this place of torment. So it comes pretty late, and it's up to you to, I mean, people have different ideas about how much that matters. To me, when I used to believe in hell as this place of punishment, but when I found out that the people who wrote the most of the Bible didn't believe that, I said, well, what the hell? Why should I believe it? You know, there are sayings in the Gospels about Jesus talking about those who, you know, being cast into the outer darkness, and Gehenna is an interesting example, and there's interesting examples of things being translated as hell or Satan that don't actually say that. So, like, in a lot of translations of the Bible, they'll translate Gehenna as hell. Gehenna was a trash heap. It was the trash heap outside of Jerusalem. Jesus was using it as a metaphor to basically say, this is trash, and then people started translating it as hell. Or a lot of, like, old Canaanite or other gods, like Baal or Beelzebub, got translated as Satan, which they weren't ever the same thing. So those sayings in the Gospels where Jesus talks about people being thrown into hell, this is too much to, like, really give you the full analysis and stuff, but I don't think those go back to the historical Jesus. I think it's possible that Jesus believed in hell because it was a common belief at the time. I don't think that it was central to his understanding of what he was doing.
Except where the rich will end up.
Well,
They don't
yeah.
sell all they have.
Right.
It's tied to this who's in and who's out.
Yeah,
Jesus upends who's in and who's out. The
Right.
privileged, the elite, the wealthy, they're out. The poor, the disabled, the hungry, they're in.
Yeah.
And so any exclusion is for people who don't let go of the system.
Right. What I mean is that there's this idea of Jesus talked about the afterlife. Christianity really emphasizes afterlife. If you're good, you get into heaven after you die. If you're bad, you go to hell after you die. When Jesus' teachings and movement were really about earth. It was about this world. It was about the material world. In the Lord's Prayer, it says, your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. This scholar and theologian that I really like, named John Dominic Crossan, he likes to say, you know, Jesus is saying, heaven's already in good shape. Earth is the problem. So he's preaching about earth. It's not about what happens after you die. It's about earth becoming like heaven. And you can even see that in Revelation, where heaven descends to earth. Earth doesn't go up to heaven. Heaven comes down to earth. So the focus is here on this world. Yeah.
I saw something, I didn't really read into it too much, but the general idea was that, like, churches' structures are kind of phallic, reminiscent of mushrooms. So I'm kind of wondering if, like, I kind of play with the idea that, like, fungi mushrooms, psychoactive mushrooms were, like, kind of one of the, like, original spiritual teachers. Maybe. And I just wondered, like,
I can comment on that.
If you want to.
I don't know if you've run into the interpretation that Jesus was basically consumed mushrooms.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that.
Have you
Yeah.
run into it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
okay,
wasn't.
sorry, I wasn't sure. We never talked about that one.
No.
The interesting thing is if you go back to the Garden of Eden story, right? What are they? There's two trees. They do two things. One gives you eternal life, and one gives you the knowledge of good and evil. Psychoactive, right? It's like it's a mind opening. So even in there, this idea of magic plants and fruit is there. And we know that, you talked about the folk healing practices. Jesus was probably a folk healer. He
Yeah.
probably knew herbs. He probably knew what would help you feel better.
Right.
You know, if you take a little of this, and it talks about him rubbing mud on the blind man's eye, which is, just, I think, a reference to those folk healing practices.
Yes, absolutely.
So, folk healing, and you were, I don't think you were in here for the long presentation, but healing was a big deal in the early movement because the disabled, the blind, the lame were forced out of Judaism and pushed to the margins. But Jesus said, no, wait a minute. Bring these people in. So he began a healing work, and he had commanded everybody he was training to be one of his disciples to heal. How to help people feel like the community included them. So that doesn't quite answer the magic mushroom bit, but certainly, I don't know what kind of mushrooms there were in Palestine back then, but I wouldn't exclude psychoactive substances. I'm
No.
a fan of cannabis. My wife is on it. I probably should go.
Terrence McKenna, if you guys know Terrence McKenna, he's
Yeah,
psychoanalyst. So he has the stone ape theory.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So essentially, humans were like tracking cattle, following them, migrating with them, and then obviously they're like tracing them by their dung, and then the mushrooms come from there. So it's kind of inevitable that they come into contact with those mushrooms.
That's interesting.
Again, that could be like the knowledge of good and evil is like referring to.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't rule out the influence of those kinds of substances in not just Jesus, but in any ancient religious or spiritual thought, because they wouldn't have thought about those things like we do. They didn't think about it as a drug. They wouldn't have regulated it like a drug, and they probably I haven't seen anything like in the actual historical text to suggest that like Jesus would have consumed those, but I don't necessarily expect that I would find that even if it was true. So I think that that's very possible.
When mushrooms do their thing, that's called fruiting.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Like maybe it wasn't an apple fruit; it was a mushroom.
Right.
Right, because it doesn't say apples, that's fruit.
Yeah. Yeah. I said apple as a joke when I said it.
That's like the general concept.
Right. My Italian second cousin insists that it was a fig. She didn't get that from anywhere. She wants it to be an Italian fruit.
So I lived in Utah for a few years before moving here. I thought a lot there, being in Mormon area, about heresy. And I just finished reading the book, The Revolution of Everyday Life, by Raul Vanagain, whatever his name is. Anarchist, written in France in 1968. But he really challenges the idea of like there being any spirit of revolt to redeem in Christianity. And he says that like there's a way that we can divine what new heresies are required, but I honestly have no idea what he's talking about. So, I was just curious if I could share that quote with you guys
please.
and see if you can make any more sense of it than I can. He says, if a spirit of revolt once existed within Christianity, I defy anybody who still calls himself a Christian to understand that spirit. Such people have neither the right nor the capacity to inherit the heretical tradition. Today, heresy is an impossibility. The theological language used to express the impulses of so many fine revolts was the mark of a particular period. It was the only language then available and nothing more than that. Translations is now necessary, not that it presents any difficulties. Setting aside the period in which I live and the objective assistance it gives me, how can I hope he quotes some radical Christian movements. He's like, how can I do any better than these people? Which are some amazing quotes, but I don't need to read them right now. But the point where he says at the end is the last and the last possible instances of priests retrieving something genuine from a real attachment to the revolutionary origins of Christianity are furnished, in my opinion, by Messier and Chiakulas, fomenting Jacquerie and riot. Not that we can expect this to be understood by the sectarians of today's ecumenizing forces. These emanate from Moscow as readily from Rome, and their evangelists are cybernetician scum as often as creatures of Opus Dei. I don't know what that is.
Opus Dei is like a cult within the Catholic Church.
It's a very militant group of priests.
Hyper conservative.
Yeah.
Such being the new clergy, the way to transcend heresy should not be hard to divine. That's it.
Interesting.
Is he essentially saying that there's that since those people that he's listing, that there are no people within the church that have been a part of revolution? I misunderstood it.
Like the language can't even be reused because of how our conditions, modern conditions, like just don't really lend itself to heresy being useful because of the way the language works in this globalized. I don't know.
So I would say, and I think this is something Charlie and I have talked about, we go a lot back and forth. Just there's a lot going on in this passage, so I don't think I don't think I'll have time to give you like a super. But so he talks about language. Charlie and I talk a lot about which translation of the Bible to use. And I think in both of our opinions, no translation is perfect. It's been translated so many times in so many different ways, and it's so difficult to do. And I'm not fluent yet. It's going to take me a long time, but I study biblical Greek because the language is so important, both in like the historical question of how we understand what these sources are telling us, but also in the question of, and the question that gets brought up in this quote is, well, is this meaningful for us anymore? The way that they talked about their experience of class struggle, does it relate to how we talk about class struggle? And I think, for me, my answer is absolutely it does. So I would disagree with that passage on that point. I think class struggle, and when I say class struggle, I really want to emphasize that I incorporate every other form of struggle against oppression into that. I don't mean it in this mechanistic kind of, well, if you own the means of production, then you're bad, and if you don't, you're good. Like, I don't mean it in that way, but all forms of oppression is a term called kyriarchy, which refers to all of how classism and racism and sexism, patriarchy, white supremacy, how these all intersect with each other. That's what I mean by class struggle. I think that class struggle changes throughout history. Of course it has changed, but the way we experience it as alienation from each other and from the rest of our society, the way we experience it materially as homelessness and hunger and disease, I don't think those change. And I think that even though they might have used different metaphors for them in Jesus' time, they still echo and they still resonate for us, provided that we, maybe we get the right translation or whatever it is.
And sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt if you weren't done. You said the book was 68.
67.
67? Okay, because that was the whole May 68.
Right, yeah. So
that whole period of
part
the
of the situation.
French Rebellion, which is great. Love it. But what was happening in Latin America was liberation theology was beginning to be born.
Yeah.
In the black churches, liberation theology was beginning to emerge. Women in the churches began to stand up for their own selves. Christian feminism gets born. So the 60s, and I know that, the 60s, we got to be careful of idealizing them, but a lot of stuff broke loose in the 60s within Christianity. It hasn't become the majority. It's still on the margin. It's still, in a liberal church, you may find a little bit of radicalism, but not a lot. And this is one reason I'm going into ministry in my 50s is like, I was radicalized by Jesus, And then for a long period, I was an agnostic, and I was going to a Quaker meeting, which Friendly Fire, I think, takes the word friendly kind of from the Quakers a little. Kind
Yeah,
of.
it started out as a Quaker group. But
Yeah. And and
Still a good name.
I agree that that Christianity, in its official forms, the Roman Catholic Church, the Protestant mainstream, which has a sort of liberal shade, but really is centrist on a good day. That shit, like you said, the big church needs to be burned down. We need the radical reinterpretation of Christianity, and it's outside of, but it will draw on the Peasants' War in Germany. People heard of the Peasants' War, Thomas Munzer during the Reformation. The peasants just took up weapons against the landlords and just started fighting. They were massacred, but it was the Thomas Munzer was preaching at this from the Bible, saying, based on the Bible, you should take up weapons against your masters. So, repeatedly in radical history, there's been a Christian influence, and I would say in other parts of the world where Islam is more, there have been Islamic radicals, and there have been Buddhist radicals, as well as Buddhist reactionaries and Islamic reactionaries. So I don't think the class war occurs within the religion. The dominant class wants to control the meaning, and the radicals want to upend the system of meaning. So that would be my response to Raul.
Cool. Thank you.
Maybe you guys have heard that, like, crystals, which are in your hold memory, and water too holds memory, carries memory. So I just kind of wonder if we're able to consciously access, like, the information in Earth. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'm just going to give you only my perspective on that, is that that to me is a spiritual belief. And I think that there's a lot of value there in talking about reconnecting with the earth and with nature and with the spirituality of nature. It's not something that I'm very good at yet. So I'm not the right person to kind of really directly answer to that. If anyone else wants to really quick, because we're almost out of time, right. Does anybody want to speak to that? Okay, if not, if it's okay, if people are, I want to offer just a couple of recommended readings or whatever, the stuff that's been helpful to me in formulating these thoughts and maybe will be helpful to you in other. So if you're interested in the historical Jesus, I want to really recommend the book Jesus, A Revolutionary Biography by John Dominic Crossan. What he does is he's not a Marxist. I've actually spoken with him, and he told me he's never read Marx or radical literature. He's about as liberal as you can get without being radical. But he does kind of unintentionally take a very materialist stance on interpreting the Bible historically. So that's good. In terms of theology, so there's a book on feminist theology called In Memory of Her by Elizabeth Schlussler. She's German.
Schlussler Fiorenza.
Yeah, Fiorenza is her last name. And it is such the definitive text in feminist theology that there haven't really been any major ones written since she wrote it in the 70s.
I would disagree with that, but
Different conversation.
Another day.
People still talk about hers.
they do.
Very much.
Is this the Christian workshop?
Yeah.
I'm sorry I missed y'all. I wanted to be a part of this badly.
Oh, we're sorry we missed you too. We're just wrapping
We're
up.
gonna do a thing tomorrow at 10 a.m. So.
Okay, that's what I wanted to ask y'all too. Y'all, are y'all doing that tomorrow?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I would like to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
We want you to be there.
We'll have to talk with you if you want to hang around after the meeting.
Yeah.
At least I'm willing to.
There's another book called God of the Oppressed by James Cone, which I think is a very important formulation of liberation theology from a Black American or New African perspective, which I think is very important for Christians and radicals to read. Yeah, it is very good.
What was that one again?
God of the Oppressed by James Cone.
We just died.
Yeah. So those are I don't want to give you guys like a huge reading list of like books to read. Yeah, but no, those are the good books. Otherwise, I would look up Christian atheism as just a concept. You don't have to like read all the theological books about it, but that was a very important stepping stone for me to getting into this radical Christianity. And then I had something else, but I forgot what it is. So I guess, yeah, those would be good. And of course, my book when it comes out.
Right.
I would love it if anyone who wants to keep in touch would write your email address and your name down here.
Where you're located.
Yeah, that too. Whatever information
Like I
you
said,
want to give us.
At least I'm willing, and I think Christian is with it. He has a busier schedule than me. I'm willing to travel, Midwest. I probably could go further, but
Cool.
Midwest, easy.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in this. This was really special. I'm really
Thanks
glad
for
you were
doing
here.
this.
This is great.
Great,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much.
But also,